We go now to part 3, solid waste management. Why can't the Philippines solve its trash problem? We can talk about this for hours and consume the entire time allotted to this topic and still not come up with an answer. What is solid waste? This refers to any type of garbage, trash, refuse, or discarded material, and can be categorized according to where the waste is generated. For example, municipal solid waste, healthcare waste, even e-waste. Over 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste are produced annually. This table gives an estimated waste generation by region in the Philippines. And we have estimates coming from as far back as 2015, then leading up to 2024. So this data is fairly recent. And you see that as a total, the trend has been increasing. Of course, you do not have to remember those figures. It would be enough to remember that the trend is increasing. And then you may want to look at NCR because NCR is usually the most common point of discussion or contention. And for the National Capital Region, the trend is increasing as well, though not as large as the entire Philippines. There are small increases across the years. And this estimated waste generation, we are talking about tons per day of waste, solid waste. In the Philippines, solid waste management is guided by the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, or RA 9003, which mandates a national program for systematic and comprehensive waste handling and reduction. The National Solid Waste Management Commission, chaired by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, DNR, oversees the program. It includes solid waste management or SWM boards and 10-year SWM plans for local government units. And it calls for the establishment of materials recovery facilities for waste segregation and recycling. But we do note, as with many other aspects of environmental health, that despite the law, implementation faces challenges like increasing waste generation, frail enforcement of the law, and resource limitations in LGUs. RA 9003 covers systematic administration of activities which do not harm the environment, like segregation of waste at the source, segregated transportation, storage, transfer, processing, treatment, and disposal of solid waste, and all other management activities. So looking at this, even if they sound or look like very technical terms, somehow you get, zapped to the household situation where you as an individual can already contribute a lot simply by segregating your trash into what we're told to put in nabubulok, hindi nabubulok, the perishable, non-perishable, biodegradable, and all the segregation. So one individual, each person doing their part can already contribute in some way to the enforcement and the success of the solid waste management program. Local government units hold the primary responsibility for the effective and efficient solid waste management in the country. But poor solid waste management in the Philippines is still prevalent. An open, glaring example would be the open and controlled dumps still being used. So this poses great threats on the country's environment and public health, which includes the effects of these as listed: the alteration of physical and chemical properties of the soil, leachates from unsanitary landfills and open dumps, objectionable odors, and even soil and groundwater pollution. The gravest problem, probably, is the scarcity of new landfill sites for the growing number of garbage generated by Filipinos. And you would know that some years back, landfills in the Philippines were filled up to capacity and were forced to close. So we had premature closure of the San Mateo waste disposal facility sometime in 2000, and authorities were hard placed to identify where to put the trash that was still coming up. By law and its targets, it should have been that by February 16, 2004, there'd be closure of open dumps. And by February 16, 2006, there'd be closure of controlled dumps. But note, it was only in May 2021 that DNR closed 335 open dump sites, 17 years after the deadline. In the recent compendium of Philippine Environment Statistics released by the Philippine Statistics Authority as of July 2025, this is the number of solid waste disposal facilities by type in 2024. So there are 12,855 materials recovery facilities, and you see in smaller font the figures in 2023. There are now 343 sanitary landfills, 172 registered treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. But sadly, there were also more illegal dump sites, 79 now, jumping from 43 in 2023. So what do we do with all this trash? Let's talk about what we cannot do. Alinsunod sa RA 9003, ipinagbabawal ang pagsusunog o pagsisiga ng basura. The open burning of solid waste is prohibited. And anyone found guilty will be forced or will be fined an amount of 300 to 1,000 pesos, or jail time from 1 day up to 15 days in the local government unit where the violation was done. So we're not allowed to burn our trash. Additionally, here are other prohibited acts: littering, throwing, dumping of waste, undertaking activities in operating, collecting, or transporting equipment in violation of sanitation operation, the causing or permitting the collection of unsegregated, non-segregated, or unsorted waste, squatting in open dumps and landfills. And each violation or prohibited act has a corresponding fine or penalty. There are many issues that come with solid waste management, and here are some of them. There's a very high cost of collection service that is heavily subsidized by the LGUs. There's lack of enforcement, sometimes poor planning and administration. There are recycling facilities, true, but they're concentrated mostly in high urban areas. And there's lack of proper treatment facility on healthcare waste. And this is probably a lesser investigated portion of the entire issue. There's difficulty in finding a suitable sanitary landfill site because of the high cost of development, operation, and management. And sometimes the SLF operations often end up as open dump sites, and that's a sad reality. Let's leave the problems for a bit and concentrate on the more positive or optimistic side, one that we can do on an individual personal level. So what's the best formula for solid waste management? That's S plus 4R plus C plus D. Segregate, reduce, recycle, reuse, recover, compost, and dispose. There is no lack of information or advocacy materials regarding segregation. And not only are we encouraged to segregate, we're actually given instructions where to put what items. So we see labels like recyclables, residuals, food waste, special waste. Pwede rin namang Tagalog, bawasan ang basurang itinatapon, mag-segregate. But these are actually two concepts. Bawasan to reduce your waste and then to segregate what you have. Nabubulok na basura, nare-resiklo na basura, special waste, di nare-resiklo na basura. And then we're given information about composting, recycling facilities, treatment plants, and other alternative technologies. There's also advised segregation of hospital biomedical waste, wherein you put general waste, infected plastics, infected waste, glassware, and sharps. This is material from Hong Kong, and you see the segregations into glass, organic, paper, plastic, e-waste, even metal. This is a very clear picture of responsible waste management hierarchy. The preferred option being reduce, and then in decreasing preference, reuse, recycle, recovery, and disposal. So reduce the generated waste in everyday life. For reuse, you can repair or recondition devices or um, direct the reuse of other parts. And then recycling will involve turning material into a new substance or product. Recovery is when you can't recycle. And finally, you dispose into a landfill when there is no other alternative. The waste diversion programs would include the following: community-based ESWM, establishment of MRFs or materials recovery facilities, the nationwide search for model barangays, which is an activity undertaken by barangay units. And then there are several recyclables collection events in many municipalities and cities, a waste market possibly, and the recycling industry development. So following are just some pictures of MRFs. This is one in Barangay Maimpis, City of San Fernando, Pampanga. Then there are also MRFs with processing activities right there on site. And of course, we look into the recycling of biodegradable waste, for example, which can lead to biogas technology, and where we see the conversion of organic wastes into energy and biofertilizer by an anaerobic process. And I end with this picture where we see school chairs being constructed for greater use of small children from recovered plastic materials. And with that, I end part 3, solid waste management. We are now on part 4, air pollution. There's great mortality and burden of disease from ambient air pollution. Just to look at situation and trends, in 2016, Ambient air pollution was responsible for 4.2 million deaths. Worldwide, ambient air pollution is estimated to cause about 16% of the lung cancer deaths, 25% of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease deaths, 17% of ischemic heart disease and stroke, and 26% of respiratory infection deaths. Particulate matter pollution is an environmental health problem that affects people worldwide, but particularly those in low and middle income countries. Air pollutants may be primary or secondary. In primary, you see particulate matter, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, the oxides of nitrogen, hydrocarbons, lead, and benzene. Secondary pollutants include photochemical smog and ozone. Particulate matter are defined as minute solid and liquid particles directly emitted into the air, such as diesel soot, road and agricultural dust, particles from the manufacturing processes, and photochemical reactions involving pollution gases such as sulfur and nitrogen oxides that are a byproduct of fuel combustion. This graphical representation shows us pictorial examples and a listing of common substances, but we also see the relative sizes of these particles, and those below 0.1 micron, we call them ultrafine particles, and the sizes can range from that 0.1 up until 10 microns. Now, particulate matter 10 can be divided into several size fractions. For example, those between 2.5 and 10 microns in diameter are called coarse particles, and these are soil, dust, silica, salts, pollen, even tire rubber. The fine particles fall in the 0.1 to the 2.5 micron range. And as we said, those less than 0.1 micron are referred to as ultrafine particles. So, the fine particles would include sulfates, nitrates, ammonia, carbon, lead, and organics. Regardless of the size mentioned, adverse health effects have been associated with all inhalable particles, PM10, as well as the PM2.5 and the ultrafine subfractions of PM10. Recent studies have exposed the link of particulate matter to atherosclerosis, where exposure to PM provides a scenario of chronic low-level inflammation, which arises in the lungs and then enters the blood circulation. The presence of particulate matter also favors the release from lung macrophages of extracellular vesicles that have inflammatory properties. This chronic condition can lead to plaque formation and subsequent atherosclerosis. Relevant to any discussion of air pollution would be the Clean Air Act. The Philippine Clean Air Act of 1999 was meant to formulate a holistic national program on air pollution that shall be implemented by the government through proper delegation and effective coordination of function and activities. It is supposed to encourage cooperation and self-regulation among citizens and industries through the application of incentives market-based instruments. It was designed to focus primarily on pollution prevention rather than on control and provide for a comprehensive management program on air pollution. One of its acts or mandates was to promote public information and education, to encourage the participation of an informed and active public in air quality planning and monitoring. And it was made to formulate and enforce a system of accountability for short and long-term adverse environmental impact of a project, program, or activity. The Philippine Clean Air Act of 1999 was meant to bring into collaboration all these government entities, departments, administrations, and even educational and information agencies. To bring up to speed certain figures, we also have from the Compendium of Philippine Environment Statistics as of July 2025, a report regarding 2024 measurements. So this shows us the annual average measurement of PM 2.5, PM 10, and total suspended particulates in 2024. So we had 73.33 micrograms per normal cubic meter of TSP, or total suspended particulates, which were defined as solid particles and liquid droplets 100 micrometers or less in diameter. Now we had PM10, fine particles less than 10 micrometers in diameter in the amount of 32.85 micrograms per normal cubic meter. And for PM 2.5, we had 17.36 micrograms per normal cubic meter. To put these values into context, I've provided this table 3.26 that came from the 2021 WHO Air Quality Guidelines. And we see here the recommended 2021 values for PM 2.5 and PM 10. And we see the annual and the 24-hour. So looking at the units, microgram per cubic meter, we see that the level for PM 2.5 is 5 or should be 5. The one for PM 10 is 15. And you see our country's values, and immediately you get a sense of how badly we're doing. There are identified barriers to the complete and full implementation of the Clean Air Act. And as you will see, they may be similar to the issues or barriers attendant to the other environmental health protection programs. Lack of sufficient political will, inadequate infrastructure, training, and resources, the lack of good air quality monitoring data, the lack of necessary emission factors and emission inventories, and the poor monitoring of the health impacts of air pollution. It would be fair to state that some degree of information is present, but perhaps we're not reaching the the performance that we initially aimed for. So if we'd like to think positive about it, let's all work together to help in generating data, generating research that would allow us to have more information that will direct us to better management and better implementation of the program that we already have at hand. So in summary, for air pollution, we looked at the different sources and effects of air pollution. We looked at the Philippine situation and identified some serious issues and barriers attendant to the problem of air pollution. So that's it for part 4. Finally, we get to part 5 of 5, climate change and global warming. In a very simplistic sense, we can refer to climate change as regional weather change and to global warming as increasing temperatures worldwide. Climate change and global warming are two terms that are often interchangeably used, but they actually have distinct meanings. The way that weather and climate are sometimes confused, even though they are related in some way. Climate change is a long-term change in the average weather patterns that have come to define Earth's local, regional, and global climates. So the changes observed in Earth's climate since the early 20th century are primarily driven by human activities like fossil fuel burning, which increases heat trapping, greenhouse gas levels in the Earth's atmosphere, and human-produced temperature increases, which are commonly referred to as global warming. Natural processes can also be a factor in climate change. For example, cyclical ocean patterns like El Nino, La Nina, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which are examples of internal variability. And there's what we call external forcings, such as volcanic activity, changes in the sun's energy output, and even variations in the Earth's orbit. Scientists use observations from the ground, air, and space, along with theoretical models, to monitor and study past, future, present climate change. And the key indicators would be global land and ocean rises, rising sea levels, ice loss at the Earth's poles and in mountain glaciers. Global warming, on the other hand, is the long-term heating of Earth's climate system observed since the pre-industrial period, and this is due to human activities, primarily fossil fuel burning, which increased heat-trapping greenhouse gas levels in Earth's atmosphere. The two terms, as we said, are often used interchangeably, but climate change refers to both human and naturally produced warming and the effects that it has on our planet. Global warming is most commonly measured as the average increase in Earth's global surface temperature. It has been shown that from the 1880s up to the 2000s, temperatures are rising rapidly following increases in carbon dioxide emissions and concentrations. What about the Philippines? How is the climate change problem in our country? The UNDP states that the Philippines has a 0.48% share of global greenhouse gas emissions. It ranks number 1 in the Climate Vulnerability Index ranking and number 116 in the Human Development Index ranking. In the Philippines, energy production is the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions because of the reliance on coal and oil for electricity generation. In 2023, fossil fuels accounted for approximately 88% of the country's energy mix, and we produce around 150 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. This graph from Global Carbon Budget 2023 shows how from the year 2000, there's been a very sharp increase in our greenhouse gas emissions. Our carbon dioxide emissions measured annually from fossil fuels and industry. Contributory to this also is deforestation and land use changes. Our country lost about 14,700 square kilometers of forest between 2001 and 2023 due to agriculture, logging, and urban development. This accounts for 835 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. We had a 7.9% decline in our total forest area, and this increased our carbon dioxide levels. Further, it also threatens the country's biodiversity, which plays a vital role in climate regulation by sequestering carbon dioxide. Our agricultural practices are also a factor because this represents the second largest greenhouse gas and methane emitting sector in the Philippines. We are the 24th highest methane emitting country in the world, and because methane has a global warming potential that's 28 to 84 times greater than carbon dioxide, you can imagine how that impacts things. So rice cultivation contributes 62%, livestock farming 25%, fertilizers 9% to our carbon dioxide emissions. There are obvious consequences in the key climate impact areas because of this. Climate change affects the Philippines in multifaceted ways, impacting both natural ecosystems and human societies. For example, there's increased frequency of extreme weather events. We know that the Philippines experiences an average of about 20 typhoons annually. This leads to extreme rainfall with increasing intensity attributed to climate change. Sea level rise. This happens at a rate of 5.7 to 7 millimeters per year, higher than the global average of 3.6 millimeters. And this poses risks to coral reefs, to coastal ecosystems, and the surrounding communities because there's erosion, increased flooding, and obvious habitat loss. An estimated 13.6 million Filipinos could be displaced by 2100 because of sea level rise. And then, of course, there's biodiversity loss, wherein changing temperatures and weather patterns disrupt habitats. Most important, probably, is the impact on people. Climate change carries with it significant human health concerns. The rising temperatures in the world lead to more frequent and severe heat waves. There are changes in weather patterns that lead to more intense rain, extreme weather events that lead to disease, to accidents, and injury. Climate change drives heat-related illnesses and makes easier the spread of infectious disease and the loss of life. There are key sectors of the economy that become vulnerable. For example, in the country, 23% of the workforce are in agriculture. And in 2024, we suffered from Typhoon Enteng, a value worth 39 million in US dollars in calculated or computed damage. Fisheries, they face declining stocks because of ocean warming. Tourism is affected by coral bleaching because it eventually leads to reducing tourist arrivals. Climate change in the Philippines, as many of our countrymen would know, is a threat to food security and economic growth. And there you see that social inequality is heightened. In a country where many people suffer from floods and loss of homes, you see how difficult it is for them to get back up, while some sectors of the population enjoy privileges and entitlements not even known to these many in their entire lifetimes. Vulnerable populations are impacted way worse by disaster. We try to exert efforts to remain resilient to climate impacts, but many poor sectors of society lack the resources to rebuild their lives following extreme events. And then the displacement from sea level rises may lead to urban migration, which strains already burdened cities and services, and therefore heightening or highlighting social tensions. But moving forward, what is there to hope for? So we have the National Integrated Climate Change Database and Information Exchange System, wherein we see that we have a national adaptation plan. And that National Adaptation Plan aims to reduce vulnerability to the impacts of climate change by building the adaptive capacity and resilience of the country and facilitating the integration of climate change adaptation into new existing policies, programs, and government activities. So specifically, it aims to identify where the priority high risk places are, the priority high-risk climate change vulnerable areas in the Philippines, to provide guidance in integrating adaptation considerations and harmonizing national strategies with international commitments. And this is very important. The NAP identifies four key climatic impact drivers or CIDs. These are climate conditions that affect the country's social and ecologic vulnerabilities, and we focus on these things. Increased temperatures and drought, sea level rise and extreme sea levels, extreme precipitation, and finally extreme wind and tropical cyclones. So in summary, we learned about climate change and global warming, how it affects the Philippines, how climate change can affect health, what actions were initiated by the government moving forward. And at this point, at the end of the 5 sections discussed under the general topic of environmental health, I'd like you to understand beyond just remembering terms and concepts that we presented here today, to understand how all these things come together, how these things interplay, and how movement in one can impact another, and how you as future medical professionals find your duty and your role in all of that, with the basic premise of uplifting life and delivering education, information, and good healthcare to our countrymen. So thank you very much for listening, and good day to everyone.